Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Up My Hockey, you are in for a good one today. My conversation with Danny Briere was top shelf. This guy is a class individual. His story is second to none, and it was a real honor to have him on the phone. Danny is a 5'9", 175-pounder that played in the realm of the big men back when the league was huge. He was not big in stature, but he had a huge heart. And we go all through his story, right back to his Drummondville days where he ended up scoring 163 points. He led the entire league in points, had 67 goals that year, which earned him a 24th overall draft pick to the Phoenix Coyotes in the 1996 NHL entry draft. He went on to play for the World Junior Canadian team. After his third time getting cut twice in two previous attempts, he ends up making it his third go-around, ends up winning a gold medal for them. We touch on that. And we get into his career, like what it was like to play in the minors, to have a great minor league season, to end up not really making it in the NHL, and what that difference was for him, to end up feeling like he belonged, to end up feeling like he was an NHLer, and then contributing on the NHL level, and contribute he did. He went on to play 973 NHL hockey games, scoring over 300 goals, almost getting 700 points in the greatest league in the world. But what I love about him is that he played the best when the lights were the brightest, and that's during the Stanley Cup playoffs. 124 games of Stanley Cup playoff hockey, 116 points, almost a point a game in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He got to the finals once with Philly, was 2 games away from a Stanley Cup ring, probably would have won or was up for the Conn Smythe that year. He's just an unbelievable playoff performer. And his career chronicled Phoenix, Coyotes, the Buffalo Sabres, where he was co-captain with Chris Drury, on to the Philadelphia Flyers, went on to Montreal, finished his career in Colorado. This is a really, really good interview. I love his story, the mindset aspect that he had to go through, what he had to learn to become a pro, and how he had to craft his game outside of the rink to really let himself flourish on the ice and to let him know that he believed and he was in the right spot. There's so much good stuff in this interview. I'm so glad you're with me, and I'm so glad Danny was able to do this. So without further ado, I give you Danny Briere. Let's dive in. Danny, awesome to have you on. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. I know you're in the hockey world still. Maybe we should touch on that. Where are you? Like, what office are you sitting in there right now?
So right now I'm in Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center where the Flyers play. I'm hired by the Philadelphia Flyers, or Comcast Spectacor is the company that owns the Flyers, the Wells Fargo Center. They own also like the lacrosse team, the Wings. They own an esports team called the Fusion, and also an ECHL team, which is AA hockey, the Maine Mariners, and that's what I'm in charge of. So I travel between Portland, Maine, and Philadelphia quite a bit, especially during the hockey season. And our players have to report tomorrow for training camp. We start on the ice on Wednesday, so it's a big week. Lots going on.
Yeah,
being sent down from the American League, so we are trying to figure our roster because we have a cap. We have a limited amount of numbers that we can have on a roster during the season, but you have to deal with call-ups and injuries, both at the NHL level and the American League level. So you're always scrambling. You start the season, you have way too many players, and then 2 months in, you're scrambling to find players. So
right.
So it's challenging, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. Hockey's still a big part of your life. I know a lot of guys, they go through that. They know one thing, which is hockey as a player, and then it's so ingrained in us that we stay around the game. And what I find interesting with you right now, and I don't want to get too much into where you're at now, because I think your story, your career, your personal career being a player is super interesting and compelling for the people who are listening today. But you actually aren't involved where you're at with the hockey side necessarily, right? You're more corporate, doing the business deals, aren't you?
Correct. So I'm learning. I'm involved with both sides, and at the minor league level, you can do that a lot more. So I'm involved because I have a good relationship with the coach. I'm also the general manager, but a lot of my I guess dealings on a daily basis has to do with our people in the front office.
Right.
So goes as far as ticket sales goes, marketing. So it's all new stuff for me. And even what's interesting this year is I'm going to be taking some classes at University of Pennsylvania here in Philadelphia, in business school to help me get more knowledge and get to know a little bit more, be more comfortable with all the dealings that I have to do every day.
Right. Well, good for you. I mean, that's a testament to you, and what I know of you is, you're always trying to get better and, trying to improve, and I don't think that ever stops, right? No matter whatever age you're at. We're curious.
I like the challenge. I like the challenge of, going into an area that I'm not comfortable. I'm not as well versed, I guess, as the hockey world, but challenge to be able to sit in meetings and in boardrooms and discuss the business side of it.
Sure, yeah, it's a different world. Well, let's dig in. Here I am talking with a guy who played 973 games, right? Almost 700 points. Had a real long, successful career, but there were times where maybe you feel that wasn't going to happen, and I know you well enough to know that there was some adversity in your story, and that's the case with a lot of guys, right? Very few guys go through a professional career without experiencing something. I like to take it all the way back even to junior, to start out in junior, because just an illustrious junior career, right? Playing in the Q, you played in Drummondville. Like how many points did you have there? I think it was 163 one year. That was your draft year, right? 163 points. Correct. Yeah. Boy, a lot of things must have been going right that year for you.
Yeah. The junior, at the junior level, things went pretty smoothly on the ice. What I had to deal with at that level was mostly people like hockey experts saying I was never going to make it to the next level. When I was midget to play in major juniors, and when I was major juniors just to make the Canadian team for the World Juniors, the following year to get drafted and then to the American League, and everybody was always questioning if I'd be able to take the next step. So that was probably mentally my biggest challenge. I didn't have a lot of hurdles on the ice. Things were going extremely well. It almost wasn't good, because when I started facing those hurdles at the NHL or at the pro level, I just wasn't maybe as prepared for it. But
right.
I was facing were more mental, were off the ice. And I learned at an early age how to deal with that when people were questioning my size, especially. I learned how to use that and turn that into motivation and
right.
wrong. So I was able to figure that out early on. But then when I turned pro and things were not running as smoothly, when the coach has, guys that are getting paid more money than you, or a first round pick that should be playing on the power play and you're not on the power play, and you're questioning why, or hurdles that I wasn't prepared when I turned pro. And probably part of the reason why it took me almost 3.5 years to get us kind of solidify my spot in the NHL and have my career started in the NHL.
Right. No, that's great. And I totally want to get there. But I think what you touched on already, you were a small guy in a big man's game back in the, the 90s. That was when the league was big. That was when we were still allowed to hook and hold. There was a lot of things that were going against you from the size standpoint. But then I look at your stats and it's saying that you're 5'10", 180. Are you 5'10"? Is that a little bit, were you wearing heels that day?
Yeah. That's my hockey card. I'm 5'9", 5'8 3/4" to be exact.
Gotcha.
So
So 5'8 3/4. So, and there's some, I mean, it is a smaller man's game now. Obviously, skill is king right now. If you're fast and you can play, I mean, you have more of a chance. So you're fighting an uphill battle there. What do you say to the young guys, or what do you say to yourself? Like, how do you build that mental toughness, that resiliency when everyone's telling you, hey, you're not big enough. You're going to get pushed around. You don't have the strength. I don't care how many points you score. You're not going to be able to do it at the next level. Did that build a chip on your shoulder, or how did you handle that?
It did. And then first of all, you pick someone that you like. So there was a few players. So for me growing up, I mean, guys like Mats Naslund and Pat LaFontaine were examples of small guys that were be able to make a difference on a nightly basis. And then right around my time, you had guys like Steve Sullivan and you had a Marty St. Louis, who guys looking up to and say, okay, these guys can do it. I can also. That's one part of the process. I think the other part, like you mentioned, the chip on the shoulder, I was able, what I would do is I would cut clips whenever someone said something negative about me. I would cut and keep them on my bedside. And then every now and then just kind of look back at it. And I turned those negative comments into my own personal motivation. I used it as a positive to prove them wrong. I wanted to prove people wrong. That was big thing.
That's as a teenager? That's as a junior you were doing that?
I started dealing with that or doing that probably around 16, 17 years old. It worked for me. That I felt like that was my fuel and that chip on my shoulder that, okay, you know what, you think that? Well, I'm going to prove.
Yeah.
So that's what I used early on to prove people wrong and to get me fired up even more.
Gotcha. Did you have a pretty good support base growing up? Like, I mean, you obviously have that resolve. There's something about you on an innate level. I'm sure that just you got a little fire there. But did you ever have some support, whether it's from a coach or whether it's from your parents or somebody along the way that kind of helped you build that resolve?
Yes. There's many coaches. And I always had. When you're, a good player, coaches will try to help you. So I was fortunate. I was put in good positions by the coaches as well. So, I had a lot of coaches that wanted to help me, that did help me. But I didn't have any specialists at the time when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay, let's work on this on the mental side. That came later when I started my pro career.
Right. So one of the ones that I was involved in a little bit, and that's where you and I first met, was at the World Junior Combine. So like they had just started doing, instead of just doing a selection camp, they would bring their top guys to this thing around Christmas time or whatever. Actually, it was before. I think it was in November or something where we would get together and they would actually pick that last team. Yeah. And we'd do some red and white games and everything else. And you know the way the world works back then. When you're a junior kid, we didn't have a chance from the Western League to see you guys in Quebec. You didn't have a chance to see us. We had the OHL guys, but we all knew of each other. We all knew sort of what was going on. And you were a big name, right? I mean, you came in with all these points. You had been invited as an underage guy, essentially, and then you're one of these final cuts, and just walk us through. And that was my year. And I believe you came the year after as well, and try it out again for the third time. And I just walk me through that whole scenario. Because I know being a Canadian kid, being a top junior, that is something that I think that we've all dreamed of doing and being able to participate in. And then looking at you and where you ended up and all these accolades that you had, but that was the one little nugget that you kind of just never happened. I just wonder how that happened, if you could talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because at first, first of all, for any Canadian kids, the World Junior Championship is huge. Everybody watches at Christmas time, and I think in the U.S. now it's getting even more important. You see a lot more kids now seeing how important, and the U.S. junior team has done really well lately. So there's a lot more people paying attention to it. So growing up, I always dreamed of one day playing on the U.S. junior team. So my rookie year as a 17-year-old, being invited, being into consideration was a big deal, but I didn't expect to make the team. My second year, still underage as a 18-year-old, I thought I had a really good shot. But I realized pretty quickly when I showed up at camp, when at the time I was only 140 40 pounds. It's tough. It's tough to compete when you're facing men now, the best of the best, and they're all hovering around 200 to 210 pounds. It was tough to compete, and I realized that I needed to get stronger, but I still believed I could make the team. So being the last cut was pretty gut-wrenching. I thought it was going. I thought I was going to be part of it. And it was tough to take. And a quick funny story is we had roommates, and you get the call, and the first call that came. I
want to slow you down for 1 second because tell everybody like when this call comes, like that whole thing is I don't know. I hope they don't do it the same way now, but like just walk everyone through how that was.
Yeah. So back then they would you had a roommate, and then all the cuts, and usually I think on the last day there was 4 cuts left. To get down to 22 or 23 players. And they give you a call at 5:30 in the morning, between 5 and 5:30, to get you out of the hotel and on your way before the media gets up. So we want to get you away from the team. So around 5:15, the phone rang, and, I thought it was for me, and I picked up, and they asked me for my roommate. I made the sad face, and I gave him the phone and felt bad for him. And then about 10 minutes later, the phone again rang in the room, and I was looking around. There's no one else to pass the phone to. So I knew it was my turn. So it was pretty sad. It was tough to take. And I went home. I was drafted that following spring or summer, and I was reinvited. And finally, my third try, I was able to make the team, and as a 19-year-old play for Team Canada. Our year was in Switzerland. It was 5. We won the 5th gold medal in a row, so that was pretty cool. But I remember the year before, it was pretty tough to
right.
Get really.
That's great that you got that 5th gold. Yeah, so we won the 4th in Boston there, and then, so you were with Brad Larson, and he was the captain of that team, I believe, when you were
That's
there.
Right.
Was that Mike Babcock as well, who was the coach then?
Yeah, Mike Babcock was the coach. Brad Larson, and their line, they were our checking line. Him, Boyd Devereaux, and Alan McCauley. I think they all played the year before, if I remember, in Boston
right.
too.
Yeah.
And they played a critical role. They were a shutdown line, and in the semifinals against the Russians, they scored 2 big goals in the third period to get us a win 3-2. So
that's awesome.
The experience really helps at that level when you faced it the year before, and those 3 guys together played extremely well.
Right. No, that's great. And just a little interesting side note that Brad and I grew up playing hockey together. So like our town, Vernon, where we're both from, 40,000 people. And for that town to produce two players that played in the World Junior team together was pretty crazy. And then Brad went on to play a second one and to captain the team. So that was really, really cool. Obviously, that he was able to do that under that spotlight. And he was just always one of those guys that kind of found a way to get it done, right? And one of those guys, I think he earned that letter on his chest, that's for sure. And he just that's the way he went about it.
What's impressive with Brad is just his leadership qualities. He's a guy that brings everybody together, makes everybody play for each other, and that's what he was so good at. Maybe not the most natural skills, but compensates for it by his leadership, or more compensates for it. I mean, it's really impressive, and probably one of the best captain Canada's had at the World Junior Championship.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, that's something that I'd love to touch on too. Even once we get more into your career and wearing that C, and what what leadership means to you, and what you think certain guys embody it, and what traits those are, what leadership traits are. Because everyone has a little different take of it, I think. But let's go. Okay, so now you've been this junior star. You end up getting drafted in the first round to the Coyotes. A testament to you, and a testament to your size, to even that era. I mean, to go that high of your stature was. I mean, that's how much you crushed it, right? So that was a big deal. That draft in itself, was that building that chip on your shoulder, because you had so much success, and yet you still went 24th or whatever it was in the draft? Where, if you were 6 foot or 200, I'm sure you'd have been top 3, right, with those types of numbers. So, like, how did that work for you in your head?
In my head, I was prepared to go middle of the second round from the comments that I was hearing. And at that point, I didn't have any control over anything. What was done on the ice was done. I couldn't change anything. I was at their mercy. So I was, I in my head, it was fine. I was going to go somewhere from the beginning of the second round to the mid-second round. That's where my rank was. I knew some of the teams that were interested, and that was the range they had kind of let me know
Correct.
that going. So to be able to go in the first round, I didn't care. That was to me like a big jump. I was extremely happy about it. Yes, would hear all the comment that if I was a couple inches taller, 20 pounds heavier, I would the top 5 or top 10, but it didn't matter. I was so excited to have the chance to be selected. I was ecstatic about it, so I didn't see it as anything bad. And what's funny is the Coyotes had two picks in that draft. They had the 11th pick, and they picked the biggest guy in the first round, Dan Fote, who was 6'6".
Yeah.
And they also picked the smallest guy.
That's funny.
The 24th pick. So
there you go.
They had both sides covered.
Yeah, did they ever? I don't want to touch on it for too long, but I think there's going to be a lot of kids that are interested even how that draft process works. I know I think your draft year was right after mine, and we would all go into the town or the city a couple of days beforehand, and the teams would do their final interview process. Essentially, they'd all have different ways of doing it. Some teams might have had 10 scouts in the room plus the GM. Some teams only had their top guys. I mean, everyone handled it differently, and even like the way they would interview you, I found was very different. And I myself felt that, boy, like some places I walked out of being like, why did I even go in there? Like, those guys hate me, and then other places were like, oh, that felt good. Like, it was such a weird experience for me. What was your takeaway from that experience?
It's the same thing. There's teams where I was wondering why I even went. All they did was criticize my play, criticize how small I was, and I wouldn't be able to bring anything. There's other place you would go, and they would put you through some workouts that you didn't understand what it would even help for.
Yeah.
Other team all they wanted was for me to take a mental test, and have their psychologist kind of look it over. So it was, everybody had their own different ways of doing it. So it was very interesting. But at the end of the day, the team that had shown me the most interest is the team that ended up selecting me. So
I was going to say, because sometimes that's different too for guys. So you did feel that Phoenix was interested, or they were Phoenix at the time, and they're the ones who end up getting you. Correct.
So there's players sometimes that they have no idea that a certain team likes them, and they select them. In my case, it was the team that had shown me the most interest was the Phoenix Coyotes, and they selected me with their second pick in the first round.
That's great. Yeah, that's a pretty awesome day, generally speaking, for guys, right? I mean, your whole junior career is really built around that. Everyone wants to get drafted, and to go there and have a story that you feel good about is awesome. Now let's even move forward. So now you're drafted. You had one more year of junior after you got drafted, right before you were able to go pro. Is that right? Yeah. So you got drafted.
I had one more year. That's the year that I went to the World Championship. Yeah.
Right. You went to the World Championship that year. And then you come out and we go to Springfield. So it's your first, well, I wouldn't say your first, you would have had your first camp the year before, right? Yeah. So you would have went to camp went to regular camp, done the main camp. That's an interesting experience. I don't want to spend too long there, but I mean, wow, right? That's a big wow factor for all of us walking in there. But now you're stepping in there with your second year, and you'd probably think you got a chance, right? I mean, I assume you're walking into camp thinking, you know what, I'm going to make this team. I'm a first rounder, had another successful junior career, won a gold medal, right? All these things, you're feeling good about yourself. And just give me an idea of your mindset and sort of what you were feeling about that second camp.
Well, you have to go in and believe you have a chance to make it. Realistically, I knew that they probably wanted me to play at least 1 year in the minors because of my size especially. So I was aware of that. It wasn't a big surprise when they sent me down. But camp, I believe I could surprise them. I believe I could, make something happen and really work my way onto the team. But clearly, when I look back, I was far from ready, both physically and mentally, to compete against at that level. And it was the best thing for me to start in the minors and going there and realizing what it takes to play pro, because even the American League is a tough league. Early on, I was struggling. Didn't understand why, but it was the best thing, because in the American League, they'll keep, they just kept putting me back on the ice, even though I would make mistakes. It would cost us goals, sometimes games. The next day you're back on one of the top units on the power play in the top 6, and you're back out there, and it's about development. Like the NHL, where if you don't perform, you're relegated to the bench or the press box. I was right back on the ice, and that was a big part, a huge part in my development, that sometimes young players don't understand. It'd be better to be in the NHL sitting in the press box or on the bench, but having that year to play a ton was way better, because I kept improving. I kept getting better and trying things and making mistakes and going back out there and learning. A huge step for my development.
I think there's a big distinction now, though. Like, and I'm gonna call you out on one thing, because now you're 43 or how are you, 43?
43, 40, no, 41 still. Don't.
Coming up 42. That's right. You're
42 soon.
Right. So 41-year-old man, right? Father now, you got kids of your own. You've been through it. You have the ability to look back and reflect. Now, I'm going to challenge you and say 20-year-old Daniel Briere in the minors with 92 points in 68 games doesn't think that's the best thing for him.
Correct.
Right? So and that's the thing that I think these young, and myself included, right? Like, I think it's a testament to guys who want to get somewhere. They think that they shouldn't be there, that they should be somewhere else, right? What would be like?
I was wondering why they would call up other guys that were playing on the third line and had 10 goals that year. And I couldn't understand that. But looking back, like, things were going so well, they didn't want to disrupt anything. They knew if they called me up to play on the fourth line, maybe a little bit of power play here and there. And at the time, especially where they only called 1 or 2 penalties a game, that there just wasn't any use for me to come and sit on the bench. At the time, I was wondering, just like everybody else, you wonder, why am I not getting called up? What else do I need to do? But it was the best thing for me to and if I saw Bobby Smith today, I'd be the first one to admit that he did the right thing.
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting, though, because I think and you at the time, I know we've had a discussion about that before, and I know myself included, I hope things have changed a bit, but there was zero communication about that. Like what we're just talking about, right? That this is being done because it's in your best interest. So we feel it's in your best interest. And you might not believe us, but I mean, just having those conversations, you're just stuck there. You're doing whatever you think you can do, and you're kind of in this vacuum, and you're left to be mentally tough, if that's like the right word. I don't know if it is or not, but I think that people don't really understand how that works. I don't think players understand that coming out of junior, and I don't think like the common parent or like just spectator gets what it's like to be that kid who's trying to get somewhere and nobody's talking to him, really, right? You're just doing your thing.
Correct. Yeah, and that was lacking back then. There's teams that do a better job with it nowadays, but there's still players that are wondering what's going on. And I think as we move forward, that's certainly something I would like to work on with a certain team if I could help. I know that's an area I could help guys, and I know that's what you're trying to do as well. And I think it's so important, but people don't realize mentally how much of a relief it is to have someone that's been there, to understand what they've gone through, and to make them understand a little better of what's expected of them, and what's it going to do for them in the long term. Because we want, especially nowadays, we want everything right now. We want to be we want to be on the power play. We want to be on the first line right away, sometimes even before we deserve it. to have someone that you can talk to, that you can have explain to you why certain things are done that way. I wish I would have had that to maybe get away from all the stress, not stressed about it. You can have people say, "Hey, just take," like the GM would say to, and you've probably heard it too, with just go in the minors, your time will come. Don't worry about you're going to make it. Well, yeah, more than that. I want to know, like, why am I going to make it? Why are you so sure? What do I work on? What are the expectations? Why are you taking me down when I feel like I'm ahead of other guys? So I think, there's teams that are doing a better job, but there's still a lot of improvement that can be done.
Sure. Because there's just a lot of gray area, and that's one of the things I want to touch on. I know you ended up playing with Shane Doan, potentially a Hall of Fame type guy, career, played a long time, just a real icon there, especially in Arizona. And when he came down, so he was a first overall pick or first round pick. I think he was 7th overall to Winnipeg. Right. Winnipeg, obviously, that franchise comes down to Phoenix. I don't know how well you knew him or didn't know him, but I do know that you guys played. Donor played as an 18-year-old in the NHL, played as a 19-year-old in the NHL, maybe even part of a third season. I think if I got my numbers right. And then he came down and played with you guys in Springfield. So you're leading that team in points. Right, you're also a first round pick. This Western League, this big burly farm boy comes in. He's doing okay, but I mean, if I looked at his stats, I was just trying to put myself in your position, right? I mean, Donor had roughly about a point a game. You were about a point and a half a game. He's got all these NHL experience. You're kind of outperforming him, and he goes up again, and off he goes, and he's in the show. And I don't know like that dynamic there, but. Like, were you guys buddies at that point, or were you adversaries, or like, can you describe how that relationship started?
Well, first of all, Shane Doan might be the best human being in the hockey world. I don't think I've met a better human being in the hockey world. Shane and I are pretty tight. We're really good friends. And that started, I got to meet him at the camp for World Juniors in 95 or 96 the year that you went to Boston. We hit it off in Calgary that summer, him and I, and then I ended up being drafted by the Coyotes, and that continued when I went to camp, and then my second year pro, I made the team, and I spent pretty much all my road trips with Shane, and he was, even though we were the same age, he was already such a great leader and a mentor for me, trying to make me feel better about how things were going. And even though he was struggling on his side to perform, he always took the time to make everybody around him feel like they were the best thing around. So I had a lot of respect. Him and I were really good friends. So when he got sent down, and I got sent down first that year, and then he was sent down after me. And I know he was really upset about it. But the one thing that he was excited is that he was coming and we could play together again. And, they put us, we were playing together. We actually on the second line, because we had Chad Kilger, who's also a first round pick. He was 4th overall, I think, to Anaheim a few years before. He was on our team, and he was running the first line. So we had a very, very good team in the minors, but, and you can ask Shane Doan when you see him, but he said like that's probably the most fun he's ever had playing hockey, those 3 months that he was down in the minors, because again, he could just go out there, play about 25 minutes a night, make mistakes, and not care about it. And I think for his development, once again, it was amazing. It turned him around. He went back and he knew he could score, and he could play at the pro level, the same game that he played in juniors before. And he was called back up and never came back down after that. I followed him a couple years later, but once again, for his development, it was a huge part of the story why he became such a great player. But in the moment, I'm sure he also had a tough time to see through that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, looking at his stats there too, I always find that interesting, like that, everyone has a different storyline, right? I mean, he played he played 2 years there and kind of had zero impact really at the NHL level. He was a young kid, but like, again, he was on the fourth line, I'm sure, or probably in those scenarios, not really. And is that best for his development? And what's happening to his confidence and what's happening to all those things? He goes down, makes the most of it. Obviously, he goes down with a good attitude. Probably a testament to Shane, like you said, the fact that he even stayed in the show was probably because he was such a good guy. You know, I mean, he wasn't maybe producing, doing what he wanted, but he was just a good guy in the locker room, a good guy to be around, so they kept him there. And
everybody loved him. Yeah.
Right, everybody loves him, and I mean that's the thing I talk to my guys about too, is the fact that it's a people sport at the end of the day. I mean, you can be as good as you want, you can be as great as you want, but people need to like you. You know, like that's an element, right? You got to be a good teammate. The coaches got to care about you, right? The organization has to care about you. And if you can have
that's such a good point, and we don't talk about that enough. You know, when you're a good teammate, everybody around you, your teammates will do everything in their power to help you out. And hockey is a team sports more than any other sports, any of the major sports. You can't do anything on your own. You need your teammates around you. So when you're a good teammate, everybody around you is going to want to help you. The coaches are going to want to help you. The trainers are going to want to help you, and they'll want you to succeed. So it's extremely important. And I feel it's something we don't talk about enough.
Right. Yeah. And because we do get caught in our own worlds, like, you know, trying to be the best player, individual we can be, right? And what our stat line looks like and how we're trying to get ahead. Yeah. And for those guys in the minors that are listening to this right now, I think that's, well, I mean, it happens at the NHL level too, because everyone's looking for more dollars. Everyone wants somebody else's minutes, you know, like there is that element to it. And when you're in the minors, it's especially hard because you're not where you want to be, period. You don't want to be there. You didn't play hockey from the time you were 5 years old to go play in the minors for the Springfield Falcons, right? Like you want to be in the NHL, and you feel like you need to put yourself one leg up on those guys. But if we can change that perspective of like, you know what, if this guy's better, it makes me better. And it makes, you know, like that whole mentality of that team culture it's tough to really get your head around. But once you do it, you become a better human and a better person and a better player. Yeah.
And believe me, I've seen players on the flip side. I mean, I don't want to use names here, but I've seen players that were just not good teammates, only cared about themselves, and have their career shortened and left a lot of dollars on the table because they were not good teammates. They only cared about themselves, and other players felt it, and we're not willing to go the extra distance to help them out. So you're totally right about it.
It's a big deal. One of the things I know when you were going through some of your stuff there in the minors and you were trying to get your foothold and, you know, get to where you wanted to be, which is the NHL. You told me that story about the sports psychologist that you met or were introduced to at least. And I really think that's an interesting story, even the way he approached you and then some of the stuff that he helped you with. If you wouldn't mind, maybe share that about how that introduction was made and that first sort of 48 hours of that after that introduction.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. You know, like I said earlier, in juniors, early in the minors, things went really smoothly on the ice for me. But every time I would get to the NHL, I just could not be the same player. I could not, you know, produce at the same level. Sorry, that I was, you know, when I played in the AHL or in juniors. So that was very frustrating. The owner of the Phoenix Coyotes at the time, Mr. Berg, approached me one day and he said, Danny, I have a friend of mine who's a sports psychologist, and I would really like you to spend time with him and go see him in his office. I was like, sure. Like at this point, I'm willing to try anything. And I went in to Gary Mack's office, and we started talking. And Gary asked me to describe myself, how things were going, and what was, you know, holding me back. You know, and I started kind of going around the room, blaming everybody else, from my teammates to my coaches to the referees to anybody that I could point the finger. And he kind of let me talk. And after about half an hour, he stopped me and he said, all right, we're pretty much done here. But all you've done is complain about the people around you. He says, I want you to go home and think about that and start looking at yourself. He says, I think part of the problem is you're looking elsewhere, but you're the problem maybe. And he says, I want you to go home and call me back when you're ready to take our next meeting. And I remember driving home and at night, that night, in bed, thinking how wrong he was and how clueless he was. He hadn't listened to anything I was telling him. It was everybody else's fault around me.
Right.
And I slept on it. And a couple days later, I started, because I couldn't get it out of my head. And I kept thinking about it. And finally kind of came to grips that, you know what, maybe he was right. Maybe there was something there. So about 2.5 days later, I finally grabbed the phone and called him back and said I was ready to take the next step and go back in the office and learn a little bit more about what he had told me.
Right.
And point on, it changed everything. The way I saw things, the way I was, it basically changed my career from that point on, because I went back and made me realize that, and it's so obvious, but when you're in it, you don't realize that you can only control what you can control. You can't control what the coach thinks and what line he's going to play you on. You can't control the players you're going to play with. You can't control what calls the referees are going to make. But I spent so much energies, just looking to blame something else and find excuses. And from that point on, it made me concentrate on myself. Worry about what you can worry, change what you can change when it's time. So that was one of the example. He also we became to a routine where when I would walk into a dressing room, I would leave all my problems away from the rink in my locker room. So as soon as I would take my street clothes off, that would go in the locker room and that would stay there. And then I became Danny Briere, the hockey player, the warrior that would go on the ice and play and forget about all the other problems. So that's something that I had to work on every day coming to the rink. And at first it was tough. I'd forget sometimes. But I came to a point where it just happened. After 25, I was 30, I was 35 years old. I was still doing that. It just became part of my routine on a daily basis. Early in my career, when I wasn't playing a lot, he taught me how to take some mental shifts. So if you're sitting on the bench and you're not playing, so you don't lose the feel of the game, you take someone on your team and you just follow them with your eyes and pretend you're that player. So for me, Jeremy Roenick was my example on a lot of nights when, in the second half of the game, if I wasn't being used as much, to not lose the feel in case they needed me late in the game, well, I would follow and take mental shifts with you. That helped me a lot. Another thing is everybody's different as far as how intense they need to be. So obviously a guy who's out there has to hit a lot and fight. He needs to be on a scale of 1 to 10. His energy level needs to be a 10 every time he hits the ice. In a player like myself, or if I use, let's say, a goalie, well, a goalie cannot be a 10. He needs to be relaxed. He needs to be in control. He probably wants to be at a 3, 2, 3, 4 level on that scale.
Right.
So, we figured that the best level for me is I need to be intense, but also in control. So if I got the puck, I didn't want to be one of those guys that would just slap it around and get rid of it. I needed to control the puck, make plays. So I needed to slow it down. So we figured that 7 or 8 on my energy level, that's where I needed to be. So it's managing that, controlling that. And also when you're a young player, and I was the same. I thought, okay, I'm going into a game and the coach wants me to back check hard. He wants me to be the best on the faceoff. He wants me to check and be the defensive player. I can't lose the third man. I can't turn the puck over. Blue line is extremely important. I get in the offensive zone. Now I got to fight through my checks. I can't. If there's 2 guys low, I can't go and jump in. I got to stay high as well. I can't pass up an opportunity. Every time I'm in this area, I have to shoot. So now I had like 15 things that I was going into a game thinking about, okay, I can't forget this. I can't forget that. And I was overwhelmed. With Gary, we came every game. It was different points, but we would have 2, 3 points max. So every time I let into a game, he said, you know what you need to do. Now focus on 2, 3 things maximum. So let's say I want to be the fastest skater when I'm out there, and I got to check well. So that's it. That's all I worried about. In between shifts, I come back to the bench. You let go of the negatives. You refocus. What are your 2 key points for tonight? Okay, I got to skate hard. I got to be the fastest, and I got to check well. And then that's It keeps
because the brain can't handle it all, right? I mean, and that's one thing I talk about again and again and again. One is like, first of all, to find that preparation that works for you. Like you said, like there's different guys going to prepare differently, but there is a mechanism for high performance that's going to work for you, right? And there is a way to get that done. And once you have that toolkit, right, now you're able to go perform, right? It's not just figure it out, right? And I think that's the way you and that's where we were brought up. Like we went to junior, we watched these guys that would eat pasta before the game, then everyone would have a nap, and then you show up at the rink and you'd play. There was no process, right? There was no like, hey, how are we going to do this? And if you want to do it at a top level, you want to be elite, there is a process.
There's
correct?
A process and there's a plan. And that's what I realized working with Gary Mack, and it completely changed my career. Those are just examples of things, and I could rattle off another 5 or 6 quickly like this, but those were part of the plan that helped me become a better player, better prepared. And I would get on the ice after that, and I looked across, and I would see a guy like yourself who's twice my size, but in my mind, I was better prepared. I was better equipped, and I was mentally stronger than the guy that I was facing. So I wasn't worried. I wasn't worried that the guy was that confidence was a huge part of my turnaround, even though it took a while. But yeah, and
that's the word, Danny, right there. I don't want to cut you off, but that word confidence, we've only used it a couple of times, but like, I think it's so important just to point that out and shine a light on it, because a lot of people think about confidence in the idea that, once I've scored 20 goals in the NHL, I've gotten the results. Now I have confidence to be in the NHL. Right. But that might not happen. Right. You might not get an opportunity to get those 20 goals. You have to somehow figure out a way to have confidence before you get the 20 goals. Right. And I think you just pointed out right there, like now you feel like you have this advantage. You're preparing. You got this edge. Now you have this inner confidence that allows you to probably go be the player you wanted to be. Was that a big turning point for you, that aspect?
That was huge. That was probably, like, in my development, one of the most important part of my development. And it wasn't even on the ice. It was off the ice. Like you mentioned earlier, like we're, from such an early age, we just go and we developed our skills on the ice. But what was holding me back was off the ice, how to deal with things, how to prepare, how to have a plan to be the best and feel like you're the best. Mentioned right. Inside, you have to have that confidence even before you do certain things. Before you score 20 goals or 30 goals or 40 goals, you got to find it somewhere. And when you have a plan and you know how to attack it, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, no, and I think, I don't know, it's just, it's such a, it's a crazy part of the game that guys like yourself can speak to it after they've been there. The guys are coming up. Nobody's talking about it. Like there's not, and the coaches can't do it either, right? Because it's not a thing that a coach can do. It's not a thing that an assistant coach can do. I don't know where it gets implanted, to be honest, like in the process of becoming a hockey player. Like where does somebody go to learn that preparation, that professionalism, that aspect of the game? I'm not sure. I don't even think it exists. But it is such a crazy, crucial part. So unless you're motivated as a player, I mean, now there is resources, right? YouTube, you can read books, you can do this, you can do that. Like you can seek it out. But as far as like the natural arc of a hockey player, it doesn't get talked about. It's crazy.
Not enough, that's for sure. And teams have started now having sports psychologists, but I think it's more than that. It's like a mental coach that can really help you with all aspects, not just the issues that you're facing when you play. There's issues off the ice. There's issues, like I mentioned, with preparation, with confidence. A mental coach is, I think, is something that you're going to see more and more eventually.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the next frontier too. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you found that. Just from my own personal side, I never did. I had my first, my real chance was like at 20 years old, right? I had a really good rookie year in the AHL as well, over a point a game. Like that's the other you mentioned already. That's a tough league. It doesn't get as much credit as it is. And as a 20-year-old to go in there and put up, over a point a game, you're doing well.
That's impressive. Oh yeah.
But to go then to that next level and to walk into a room and to shake hands with Matt Sundin and Wendell Clark and Curtis Joseph and to be roommates with Ty Domi and all this stuff, and it's like to feel like you belong on that ice, not only with them as line mates, but then to feel like you belong on the ice facing off against Lemieux and Gretzky and these guys that you have hockey cards of and posters in your room, like it's a whole nother level. And like that, whether you call it confidence, whether you call it comfort, I don't know what the right word is, but there is stuff that could be done to get ready for that moment, that experience. And I wasn't, right? And I'm glad that you had the opportunity there through the years with Phoenix, that they gave you the opportunity to kind of find your way there and look at the 700 games show for it, right?
And the thing is, you don't know if you're ever going to get another chance.
Right.
One chance might be your only chance. You don't know, and you have to be prepared. I was fortunate because, I had probably 3 or 4 chances before it clicked. But you don't know. I could have been, just one chance and out. That's why you want players to be ready to go when that one chance or that first chance arrives, because you don't know if you'll get another one.
No, that's huge. And I always thought that you would. I don't know, like, just everyone thinks different too, right? But I mean, you're a guy that's been successful. You're a guy that's been highly touted and regarded, and everything seems like the world's aligning. You're performing well, and you're like, oh well. You mean like that trade, for instance, for me, talking personally, I had 10 games in Toronto, and it was like, it wasn't awesome, but it wasn't horrible. It was just like, okay, next year, right? I'm going to be ready next year because I had this experience.
Another shot, yeah. Yeah.
All of a sudden, the GM gets traded. Not traded, gets fired, right? So there's a new GM, there's a new coach, the whole personnel changes, and like you said, you never know when that chance is going to come, and it never really came again, regardless of me leading the league in goals or whatever. So that's when I talk to my guys now is like, from my experience, you think there might be endless chances, but you want to be as ready as you can be for whatever opportunity you get, period.
That's right. That's right.
I want to get in a little bit because I love the fact that you're this 5'8" 3/4 guy. That ends up having this awesome career, and you end up being a point guy in the NHL, which is amazing. Not only do you end up being a point guy in the NHL, but you end up having a letter on your chest. And for a French Canadian, that's rare too. By the way, for those in the hockey world, there's not many French Canadian players that end up getting that scenario because the language barrier is the biggest thing, I would think. But so can you walk me through that, like how much pride there was or what you felt you did as a player to be able to earn the respect of your organization that they wanted you to represent, really the logo on the chest?
Well, to backtrack a little bit, I remember when I first started pro, I didn't speak English, and Phoenix Coyotes knew that they were going to send me down to the minors, and they signed a player by the name of Martin Simard. I was 19 years old at the time. Marty was 37, and they sat him beside me in the locker room in field, and that's kind of where I learned to speak the language. But what was funny is, a lot of the hockey terms are similar in French and in English. I was able to figure my way out through that, and then figure out how to make sentences with the little words in between.
Yeah.
Holding me back is the jokes and the expressions, because I took everything literally. So that was quite interesting early on.
Yeah.
When I went to Phoenix, a guy like Shane Doan was a great example of, to me, what a leader should be when, he cares about his teammates. He wants everybody to be the best that they can be. I wish I could, be 10% of what Shane Doan was as a leader. But big part of it is when I got traded to Buffalo, I came with a lot of confidence. The coach started trusting me more and more, got given a lot more responsibilities. And to me, leaders is how you deal with responsibilities. Do you try to share that with your teammates? Do you try to get the teams, your teammates, together even more, or do you want to take that and run by yourself and think you're better than everybody else? To me, that's one key of the big part of the leadership. And I always swore that I would be more like Shane Doan, and try to get the teams together. I also had a great example in front of me when I got to Buffalo. They also traded for Chris Drury. Chris Drury was just a natural leader. Has won everywhere he's been, and I started watching him, asking him a lot of questions. I didn't want to be the exact same leader as Chris. I wanted to bring my own touch a little bit, but there's so many things that part of his preparation that he was so good at, and in talking to him, how he wanted to be good at when the game mattered, not when you were down 5-0 or you were up 6-1. You wanted to be the best player when the game was tied 1-1 late in the third period. You wanted to be a difference maker. So I learned those traits from Chris. Learned some really good qualities on how to be a leader that gets people together from Shane. And and then there's a lot of other people, good people around me that I would look up to and try to make my own style. But I really believe that being a good person is the key to being a good leader. Obviously, there's a lot of little traits around it that you need to work and navigate through. But at the core, to me, preparation and caring for your teammates is I think part of the two key words for leadership. I think it was my third year in Buffalo. The coach called Chris Drury and I in his dressing room, and that's when he kind of told us that we were going to be captains together for the Buffalo Sabres. And my first reaction was to look over at Chris, because to me that was a huge honor to share the captaincy with Chris Drury. I was afraid on how he was going to take it, because Chris Drury, and he was the greatest leader, had won everywhere, and that's how I saw him. And I looked over kind of worried, and I saw the big smile on his face, and he was so excited. So that was a huge relief. And again, that just showed his type of leadership, commitment to the team. And him and I were co-captains for 2 years, and it worked great. We each had our own style, but it worked great. And obviously when you have good teammates around you and you have a team, a winning team, that really helps and makes the captains and the coaches look better.
Sure, 100%. But I think you touched on a few things there that I'd like to point out. Like, one is the benefit of surrounding yourself with good people. You're a good person. I mean, I can bet for that, and most guys in hockey are. But the thing is for you to attach to a guy like Shane Doan early, it can do nothing but help your game. And I think that guys need to seek out that. And I don't think we do a good enough job to be like, who do I want to be like? Who do I want to emulate? What's going to make me better? And if you're hanging out with Shane Doan every day on the road, that's way different than, I don't know, somebody else, let's just say, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And part of it, I was fortunate. I fell, in that place in Phoenix where we had a very old team. And Shane and I and Brad Isbister were the only 3 young guys on the team. So we ended up hanging out together because we were the only young guys. And, I couldn't have been any luckier than surrounding those 2 guys. And especially Shane Doan, who, he was the captain of the Coyotes for so long. I've never heard anybody say a bad word about him. Yeah. So I was very, very fortunate to have him around early on.
Who was the captain when you got there? Who was the leadership core? Do you remember in Phoenix?
So we had Keith Tkachuk and Jeremy Roenick. And both of them, Keith Tkachuk was the captain, and Jeremy was around, and those guys were superstars in the league. So everybody was looking up to them. So obviously, they did some great things. The team wasn't winning, so it was tough. There was a lot of animosity because, we had this team that should have won with the players that we have, with Rick Tocchet around and Craig Janney and, Teppo Numminen and Nikolai.
Right.
And so we were, talent-wise, we were amongst the top in the NHL, but things were not working out so great. And, there was a lot of animosity around the dressing room because we weren't winning. And that made it tough for those guys to lead. But they were great leaders, and there's a lot of things that I took from them as well. Just like when I went to Buffalo, I had James Patrick around that I would really look up to as well. So been. You try to get the good things from certain people, and there's things that you see that are not good ways to lead, and you got to take notes of that and remember that whenever you end up in that same situation, to not make the same mistake.
Did you ever have somebody, older, Donor's your peer, right? Like he's your buddy. Obviously you can learn from him, and I get that. I had those guys too, but was there somebody that was, come from a different era, kind of like you used Tkachuk or you used Roenick. Like, I'm not saying those guys, but was there somebody like that was maybe 10 years old that kind of took you under their wing and was a little bit of a mentor for you at any point in your career?
Well, and they, they both did. Keith Tkachuk invited me that first camp to stay with him and his family, and then 2 years later, when I was called up, or 3 years later when I was called up, Jeremy Roenick invited me to stay at his house. So there's a lot of good that I took from them. Both of them, I would say, were really good to me. Those are the two names probably that come up to me on the forefront.
Right. No, that's great. My experience, and I think it was just so pivotal for me. Like the last camp I went to was for the Detroit Red Wings. And up until that point, just on my own personal side, you talked about the animosity in the locker room and stuff. I was on essentially not winning organizations, but Florida was the exception. They drafted me. They got to the Cup final, right, the year before I was pro. So there was some good things going on in there, and there was a bunch of kind of workman-like people on that team, right? So like there was a bunch of good guys that hung out and had a lot of fun together, but I was still like 20 years old and I was only there for half a season in that scenario, right? And then I got traded to Toronto. They were having a real tough time. They weren't making the playoffs, right? So Matt Sundin was 27 years old. Great guy. It was nice to me, but I don't remember like the, hey kid, this is kind of the way we do things around here sort of scenario. Right? And then I went to LA, like Luc Robitaille was there, Rob Blake, big names in the sport, but there wasn't like a feeling of family, or there wasn't like a feeling of togetherness, right? It was like,
yeah.
I just thought it was kind of the show. And then I ended up going to New York. I wasn't there for very long, but that camp too felt just sort of the same. And again, they hadn't been in the playoffs forever at that point. And then at the end of my career, I go to Germany, I come back and I go to Detroit. And they'd been in the playoffs for 15 years and won the cups. And like, that was the most comfortable I ever felt in a locker room at 29 years old. And Nick Lidstrom was like asking me out to go play golf. And Thomas Holmstrom was sitting at the front of the bus with me. And Dominic Hasek was talking my ear off for half an hour. And like Chris Chelios walks across the dressing room floor and shakes my hand and takes me to his chili bar in Detroit. Like, he had no reason to do any of that. But that whole culture was just so collective that I was like, wow, this would have been an amazing place to start the career, with guys that seem like they care about you.
And you just made me remember one thing that I always tried to do, and I got that from Sean Burke when I was in Phoenix. Sean Burke, every single day when you walked into the rink, he would come over and ask you how you were doing, how the family was doing, and it didn't matter. He would treat me, the call-up guy, the same way that he would treat Jeremy Roenick or Keith Tkachuk or Temple walking in the room. And I thought that was so amazing. That's something that I know I look back and I wish I would have done an even better job, but that's something that stayed with me and that I tried to do. And try to treat the trainers and the fans and the fourth line guys the same as my line mate that I spent most of my shifts on the ice with.
Right.
And that's not always an easy thing to do, especially when you're going through some rough time when the team is not winning and there's a lot of pressure. So I was always amazed by what Sean Burke, how he would treat people and make him feel comfortable.
No, that's great. I'm glad you picked up on that, because a lot of times we are a victim or a benefit of our environment, right? So like what the role models that we have or the scenarios we're in, like we don't know any better, right? We don't really know. And then until you go into that scenario, like for me, like the lights just came on. I was like, wow, like if I was to ever wear a C or to have an organization or to build a team, like that's what it was. That's what I wanted it to be. It was because as a 19, 18-year-old kid to come into that organization, like you feel like you're supposed to be in that room. And just being able to say that, right, that you're supposed to be in that locker room, like, my goodness, how does that result in performance on the ice, right? It does. It just does. It has to. And those guys, those older guys, like they made you feel like you're supposed to be there. And I think being a captain or being a leader, like I think the organizations that have those guys that are doing those types of things, like you said, being good people. One of your things was like a good leader is a good person, cares about other people.
It makes you feel better. And also when you feel better, you have more confidence.
Yeah.
Now you have more confidence because you feel welcome. You feel like you're part of the team. It changes and helps out a lot.
Yeah, and I know I remember you talking because you weren't great with English, right? And you were like there was a lot of things that you even had more to go against somebody else when you walk in that locker room, like kind of just sit there, shut up, and be the rookie that you're supposed to be in back in the '90s. And some of the things I talked with guys
no choice.
Now, exactly. But like I encourage guys to have conversations. So at the end of the day, like there is good people in that locker room, right? Whether you think there is or not. And you can, even as a 20-year-old kid, you can help dictate the conversation. I mean, you can go sit beside that guy and ask him a question, right? Like, how do you prepare? Or, you know what, I'm a little nervous tonight. Like if you are strong enough to be a bit vulnerable, I think you can find those guys that are going to help you out. And I know it's easier said than done, but now it's one of those things looking back on it. It's like, those opportunities were there. We just maybe didn't want to step into them, you know?
There. And guys would welcome and jump. I would say 99% of the guys would jump at the chance of mentoring a younger guy who wants to learn from them. So, if you're a player, I would say go and ask someone you look up to. Just go sit down and ask them questions. They will divulge all their secrets just to try to help you. I'm convinced of that. And, that's something I probably didn't use enough.
Yeah, I agree. I know you got to run. So I'll wrap it up with one last thing, which I think is interesting. You're on the other side of the fence now a little bit, but just the relationship between coaches and players. I think as the game evolves, I think everything evolves, right? Like the way the game's played has evolved, the interaction and relationship between coaches and players is changing. I just think that it's something I know for me back in the day, it seemed like we were on the outside looking in. It was the coaches and it was the players and you were kind of waiting, at least I was, to see if a coach was going to build a relationship with you. It was more like that sort of aspect where I think it's got to be more collaborative. And I think, again, if you want to have an opportunity, if you want to be the best player you can be, those coaches got to like you. They gotta believe in you. And I think if you're a guy that goes and asks for that help, if you're the guy that goes and tells them you want to get better, if you're the guy that, walks through that door and says, hey, I'm here, how do I get better today? Like that does nothing but help you. And I don't know how you feel about that, but how do you think, like, did you have any strong relationships with coaches that made a difference for you or how'd you go about that relationship management?
I think it goes hand in hand in how important you are in a team, what kind of role you have. Obviously, a head coach has to deal with, 25 to 30 guys. It's tough to build a strong relationship with every single one of them. He'll focus on his, leadership group most likely. But things are changing a lot these days. More and more, coaches spend more time with their players it's just the way it is now. You have to explain a lot more to players. You have to build relationships to have them play for you. Because what I believe is a coach is a salesman. Right? I feel that you can win with any system. What you need to do is convince all your players to play your system. So you're kind of a salesman. You have to build strong relationships with your players. Players are so powerful, especially in the NHL nowadays with the big contract and the amount of money the players are making. Yeah. So for coaches, it's a key ingredient is developing that personal relationship, and you see that more and more nowadays. You don't have the as many of the old school, Mike Keenan scaring the guys into playing. I mean, Mike Keenan was an amazing coach and done a lot in his career, but I think the trend is shifting now where most coaches are closer to their players. They get to know them a little better. They become friends so they can get a little bit more out of them. Yeah. I've been studying that a lot the last few years because of what I'm going through and managing the ECHL team. And I've been very, very fortunate. I have a coach that excels at it. His relationship, his communication with his player, and I see the difference in how much the players want to play for him. and I think it's tremendous. It's an area you see more and more coaches devoting time to than before. As a player, it's still tough. You're at the mercy of your coach that way. If he's not interested in a relationship, there's not much you can do, and then you got to shift your energy elsewhere and making yourself the best or better prepared and ready to go when the puck drops.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just remember looking back, like the 14 pro teams I played on at the end of the day, like I was at that coaches conference here in right before the draft. And it's amazing how many guys either that I played for, like that are still coaching in the NHL, that were maybe in the minors at the time, are now NHL coaches or assistant coaches, or guys that I played with that are now behind the bench in some form or another. And I wouldn't say that I definitely didn't burn any bridges over my career, but I definitely wasn't really building them either necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting perspective there, because it is a people sport, as we said earlier, right? And like those guys that are behind the bench, one, they actually do want the team to do well. And for the team to do well, they want you to do well. And if you let them know that you're a guy that wants to get better, however you want to communicate that, whether that's you coming early to practice, whether it's you asking the assistant coach to help you with getting some pucks, I just think that, like, you're working on your own personal brand there, I think, and I think that we got to be, sometimes we're a little bit too shy about what it is we actually want, and I think when you're vocal about what you want, people want to help, generally speaking, someone's going to want to help you there. And I think as a player, we can do a little bit to help, massage that relationship, that interpersonal relationship with the guys that have the decisions,
And that goes back to the beginning of our conversation. You control what you can control. You can't control your coach. You can't control how he's going to use you or how he sees you. But what you can control is, like you mentioned, you let him know how much you want to get better and how much you want to help the team.
Yeah.
That you can control. And I feel only good things can.
Yeah. So we'll wrap her up here. I mean, I was looking at your stat line. I mean, the 1 year, I don't know, like I would love to know what your highlight was. I mean, having 95 points in the show, top 10 in the NHL in scoring, like, wow, like that's super wild, man. Like that's something to have a big smile on your face about. But a lot of times, I mean, it does go beyond the old personal accolades and having a great stat line. Like, is there anything that stands out? Was it that year that stood out? Was it, your great playoff runs, or like, what was the number one thing when you look back on your career now?
When I look back, I mean, it's honestly, it's the success that we had in Buffalo, back to back to the conference final. It's my trip to the Stanley Cup finals with the Flyers. That year we made the playoffs on game number 82 in the regular season. We went in a shootout against the Rangers. Whoever won that game went to the playoffs. The other team went home, and we took that game all the way to the Stanley Cup finals against Chicago. It's with the Montreal Canadiens going to the conference final when the city was riding high from us beating the Boston Bruins. So when I look back, it's those moments that I can share with teammates. Those were the best times. That's the part that I miss. It's not scoring a goal for myself. It's really those long runs in the playoffs when everybody is sacrificing their body for each other. See how much guys are hurt, but they get back up the next day and they're there for you and they want to do it all over again. It gives me chills just to think about that I went through that with so many quality people. That those are the memories that I remember. I don't remember, certain goals here and there. I remember the wins and, sharing a big win, in the playoffs, moving on to the next round. Those are probably what I remember the most and what I cherish the most.
I agree. I think I was wired that way too. Like, the regular season was exciting and fun, and regardless of what level you were at. But the playoffs was kind of where it seemed, that's where guys would come together. That's where I felt like you showed your character, what you were about, as a hockey player. The rules always change in playoffs, as we know. So it's like, you got to get down, right? You got to get real, and to be able to experience success at that level must have been awesome. Do you think that and I've heard the stories. I mean, I've been to two league championships and was on the wrong side of it every time. Never was the champion, was a bridesmaid a couple times. Do you think looking back, like, did the other team do more? Like, do you feel like that run was successful, right? That that you did what you did, or do you feel that there was still something that was missing that you guys just didn't quite get?
Well, I always think about that. I go through all of them. I lost, I think, 5 times in the conference final, 1 in the Stanley Cup finals. And you always go back and try to think, what else could we have done? What else could I have done, to get over that hump? And, it's tough. I'm sure you try to learn and, from what was done. But, honestly, there's not too many. I really feel like the teams that I was on, for the most part, we left it all out there. And then I try to live my life the same way, where if you leave it all out there and you expose yourself, there's no regrets. And that's really how I feel, especially about, getting so close to the Stanley Cup. We got beat by a team that was just a little better than us. And it is what it is. But I really feel like when I look down the room, most of my teammates, everybody left it all out there, and it makes me feel better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, that's coming, I have to preface that, it's coming from somebody who never won the championship. But I think that you're a champion. If you can get that far, if you're doing those things, it comes down to a bounce here and there, maybe a call, who knows what it comes down to, right? But the fact that you can have 20 guys that get together to get that close to winning the hardest trophy, I think, in the world that is to win, you're doing a lot of things right, and that's something to be proud of.
And people remember the Stanley Cup winners, but I can tell you, I remember all of my teammates, from that year. We don't maybe get the accolades like the team that have won, but I remember all my teammates, and I know they were there for me, and they were there for each other for a full season, but 2 months of grinding in the playoffs, and I'm so proud of that. And awesome. I have goosebumps just thinking about what we went.
That's the part that we leave behind, right? And that's the part that's tough, is just that aspect, that level of competition, because I don't think it really leaves us. You try and find a way to replace it, being competitive and being, I don't know. I just think that's the tough part. You can, the game itself, obviously I love the game. I love watching it, but it's like, where do you find that outlet for that competitive spirit? It's an interesting aspect for us once we get out of the game.
Yeah. And sharing that, it's like holding arms with your teammates and going to war and, leaving it all there. Like, I'm so proud of them, even though we didn't win. Like, I still think and talk about this team. We are champions, because
it's spoken like a true leader, Mr. Briere. It's spoken like a true leader right there. That's somebody who cares and is thinking about everyone else. That's great. And thanks for doing this for me. I know you're a busy guy, like I said, and I asked you for this interview, and you said, yeah, no problem, no questions asked, and that's a testament to you too. So thanks so much for doing this. I hope you had a good time.
Well, thanks. That was a pleasure. I really enjoyed going back and reliving all those memories.
Cool. No, that's great. And I think and that's the idea here. I think you're wired that way with what you're doing. You're helping guys who are pros, who want to move on and get better. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help guys get better. And if there's anything that we can do, that we've done, that we can share a little light and help somebody maybe not have to go through the BS, or maybe get through something a little bit quicker, I think we're doing a good job. And, I know you're wired that way, and that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. So thanks so much.
Yeah, and I'm excited about what you're starting. I think it's tremendous. It's something that's needed, and I know it's going to benefit a lot of the players or athletes that are going to use you and your group. I really commend you for that. And
awesome.
I can help you even more. Don't hesitate.
All right.
Something that's needed.
I totally appreciate it, Danny. You're a true gentleman. Thanks so much, and we'll continue this conversation another time.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you so much for joining me today here on Up My Hockey. I really enjoyed that conversation with Danny Briere. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it. Danny is one of those guys that, you just enjoy being around. His insights into the game, his vulnerability, and his openness to share his story about what it took him to get to that next level, to become the player that Danny could be at the NHL level. I think there's so much to be learned there from everybody who is listening. So thank you so much for listening. Again, the best way to support this podcast is to talk about it, is to share it, is to review it. is to rate it, and that's the best way to get this into other people's hands and allow other people to hear it and to hear the message. So please subscribe, review, and share, and keep listening to Up My Hockey. You'll have another great interview here next week. Thanks so much, and make it a great day.